Hey, this is CB Smallwood, and welcome to Mental Junk Food, where we're talking about all things comics, sci-fi, horror, pop culture, fantasy, and everything in between. And today we're going to be talking about books. Yes, I said it, books. And specifically, do people even read books anymore? Or books are in decline? How do we save the book, magazine, and whatever industry? All right, so let's go ahead and let's get into it. Now, first of all, a lot of you is going to say, it's like, well, yes, it's in a decline because everybody uses iPads and all these little notebook things. Not actual notebooks, it's, with paper, but like, the digital tablets. A lot of people, people that do read, they're increasingly going over and reading ebooks and things of that nature and what have you. And yes, that's a very rational, a very sound argument, and a very fact-based and stuff like that. But I'd like to add a little bit more depth to it and a little bit more insight if that's possible. So the reason that I got on this topic is because I was on Facebook the other day, and I like to scroll down on my phone and kind of see all the little news headlines that pop up, and for some reason, I think there must have been, it wasn't an ad. I think somebody else shared it, but it's not really relevant. The point is, I saw a thing on Facebook, and I think it was Jimmy Kimmel. He did a thing where he sent somebody out on the street to ask people what to name a book. To name a book. And it's wow. It is very disheartening to watch this clip. And I'll play you a snippet of it here in just a little bit. But I just want to say that he didn't ask people to talk about books or what is the last book they read. He just asked them to name a book, which is really interesting. And the thing is, when you get to see this clip, he couldn't really find a lot of people that can even name a book. And then when he got around to asking them what is the last book they read, well, I'll show you that clip as well. So let's go ahead and get into it.
According to a recent study from the Pew Research Center, almost 1 in 4 Americans has not read a book in the past year. That actually seems high to me. I bet it's even fewer than that. So to find out, this afternoon, we sent a team out to the street to ask pedestrians to name a book. Any book. Could be the Bible, could be 50 Shades of Grey. All we wanted to know is, can you name a book? And here's how that went.
Can you name a book?
Oh, yes. I don't read books. But, what's it called?
Can you name a book?
No.
Can you name a book?
I don't read books. Yeah, that's it.
Wow, just wow. I have to say that's a little bit disheartening to say the least. But, to be fair to the good people in the streets of New York, I assume that's where they filmed it at. As anything that's edited in news and media, they basically cherry pick whatever supports the narrative that they're trying to push out, whatever the story that they're trying to tell. And I'd say more than likely, there was probably a couple of people that were honestly able to name a book, I would assume. But I do believe, I really do believe that probably more than likely a majority of people sincerely did not have an ability to name a book. Now, why is that? Why would people not be able to name a book? When asked, right off the top of their head. And it's because a lot of people just don't read books anymore. And that's pretty sad. And I think, one of the reasons is, for example, just like this video that you're watching, listening to right now, it's on YouTube, it's a huge platform, and millions and billions, gazillions of people every day get on here and watch and upload videos and all that good stuff. And, this has become one of the sources of entertainment and information. A lot of people get a lot of their news through YouTube now. some people, eventually Twitch will evolve to be kind of like YouTube, like in the future, as they try to diversify. And Facebook is trying to get into the video game, not video game as in like, like Nintendo, but like video, situation, in the video platform industry. There we go. Gosh, that's a little long-winded. But anyway, so there's all these different, platforms that are emerging, or ones that are trying to step up their game, or new ones that's going to come down the road. And a lot of people get their content visually nowadays and audibly, so that really hurts the nature of books. And also education has made books boring. The public education system in the United States has made a lot of topics boring. And I think that's further led to people having a disconnect between books and the world around them, I guess, for lack of a better word. So with things like YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and all this other stuff, I mean, people do still read. They just don't read books. I mean, there's still people that read books, but not in large numbers when you compare it to the 90s, to the 80s, to the 70s. I mean, there has been a decline through each decade, all the way up to the present, of people reading books. And it's because the rise of the digital age. Everything's just digital now. So I want to play you another clip to really put things in perspective just a little bit further. In the very same Jimmy Kimmel clip, they later asked the same people who had an inability to just name a book. They asked them a question of what was the last book you remember reading? And I really want you to see this. Listen to this. This is kind of mind-blowing. The last book that you remember reading, and this is unusual, but check it out. It's funny and sad at the same time. And this also will fit into an argument that I want to make a little bit later on. So let's go ahead and hit that clip.
What was the last book you read?
Probably Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss, maybe?
I haven't read a book for like 12 years.
I'm drawing a blank. Jeez. I need books. Sorry. I am totally blanking out on books.
What do you do for a living?
I was a librarian. Now I'm unemployed.
Good old Cat in the Hat, The Grinch That Stole Christmas, Green Eggs and Ham. It doesn't really surprise me at all that people recall that as one of the last books that they read, because if you think about it, first of all, The Cat in the Hat, The Grinch That Stole Christmas, and all these other books by Dr. Seuss, they engage the creative centers of the brain, that they stimulate the imagination, and they're just fun. If you make education fun, if you encourage people to be inspired and to have passion and different subjects and curriculums, then you're going to more likely turn out people that's going to continue that interest as they grow older and move on with their lives. And the thing is, adding to that, the current public education system in the United States does not really encourage kids to be free thinkers. Instead, a lot of what's taught is designed to make you into this cog in a wheel, a part of this big machinery. You can't really be a free thinker in the system that's set up. So basically, if you want to know what the public education in the United States is today, is that you're encouraged to memorize a set of facts, recite those facts, take a test on those facts, then you get a degree and a diploma. Now, the problem with that system of just memorizing facts is that it creates bureaucrats. It creates robots, and these people end up taking positions later on in life in education themselves. Later on, they take positions even in government and other things that affects our daily lives as citizens of this country. And so when you have a nation of bureaucrats, you have a nation of people that don't know how the real world operates or how it works. You have a nation of people that are in charge of a nation that have an inability to think outside the box and to be creative problem solvers. And that's something that is desperately needed. So how do we fix this? How do we turn back the clock to where, if it was ever the case anyway, to where we can create more free thinkers in society and things of that nature? Well, first of all, we got to get people reading books. You know, it doesn't matter if it's an actual physical book or an e-book, just reading books, okay? And how do we get people to read books again? We got to start with the kids. That kind of sounds like indoctrination, but I don't mean it that way. But you got to start with the kids. You know, you got to show them why reading books is worthwhile, why it's exciting, because, you know, there's a plethora of books on a wide variety of topics. So if you're somebody that's not really into fiction, you know, there's plenty of how-to books that can teach you everything in the world that you want to learn how to do. You know, if you're somebody that's more into fiction, then there's everything that can tickle your fancy from fantasy and sci-fi, horror, romance novels, what have you. You know, and then on and on it goes. So how do you get kids engaged in reading? And the answer is comic books, comics. And you see what I did there? You see how I just brought it all full circle? Well, there's a man who talked about this very thing back in the 80s, I believe. You may have heard of him. His name is Stan Lee. And Stan the Man Lee was on a show, I believe, that was called Thick of the Night. Now, to give you a little bit of a background on this clip that I'm getting ready to play, basically Stan Lee is a representative of Marvel Comics at this time, and he's going around and he is promoting Marvel Comics, and he's trying to get the word out there of what it is that they publish, and basically build brand awareness and what comic books are and the value of comic books. And the host of the show, is not really into comic books. He's very dismissive of them, but he's still being respectful in the sense that he is entertaining Stan Lee's viewpoints. So let's go ahead and take a look at that clip, and then I'm going to tell you, I'm going to wrap up this video, what I think about that.
There are plenty of kids who aren't reading much of anything anymore.
Well, the funny thing is, without trying to be overly dramatic, which I love to try to be, comic books basically are probably the last bastion, the last defense against the creeping illiteracy occasioned by television, because, as you know, most kids will spend as much time as possible in front of a TV set. You can't get them to read, but you take a Marvel comic book and put it on the coffee table between the youngster and the TV set, and slowly but surely he will grab that book and pick it up and look at those ridiculous pictures and be fascinated by it. Now, in order to know what's happening, he's got to read the words. And even though he doesn't want to read particularly, before he knows it, he's enjoying the story, and eventually they go on to read real things.
What a great spokesman for Marvel Comics. A guy that truly knows his stuff. I remember when I first watched this interview, that was the biggest thing that leapt out to me. You know, it's like he was able to, in such few words, and so, I don't want to say eloquently, but you know, he explained it so well, the value of comics, in a way that I've not really heard anyone else really explain. That basically kids that read comic books, you know, there'll be a comic book on the coffee table, and then they'll get interest in it. They'll look at the pictures, and eventually they'll find themselves reading the words. And if it's a good comic book, then they're going to want to read it again, and then they may want to go buy another comic book, you know, by the same publisher of the same name. You know, if it's Superman, they may go out and buy another Superman comic, what have you. And then eventually these kids get used to reading comics, and then they get used to reading, period, as a thing that pleases them, where they go on to read varied subjects as they get older. You know, they may purchase books, you know, that are fiction or how-to books or what have you, or history books, because that's something also that interests them. But it all started with comics for a lot of kids. And so, you know, bringing it back to Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss is the public education version of comics, I would suppose. And the thing with comics is you're getting a lot of literary bang for your buck. I mean, can you imagine some kid trying to read a Chris Claremont X-Men book today? You know, I think another interesting point that I want to add to this is that comic books are not selling as well as they used to. On one hand, it is because of a lot of politics that's been interjected into things. It's because a lot of the ways that the publishers and editors have behaved and have interacted with the fans in a negative sense, and a lot of creative choices that they've made with a lot of iconic characters, which turned off a lot of readers. So on one hand, that's one reason why sales are low in the comic book industry today, where comic books used to sell 100,000, 200 or 300,000 copies or more, and that was like for books that were not considered bestsellers, you know, back in the 80s. But now in the millennium, you know, a lot of books are considered a success if they can even break 50,000 copies. So why is that? What is the other end of that I'm hinting at? Well, basically, when Diamond Distributors became the only party in town, I think it was them, I'm not for sure, but I believe it was them that basically said, like, hey, we don't want comic books being sold in gas stations and Walmarts and grocery stores anymore. You know, all we're going to distribute these books to now is comic shops only. And let me tell you, when that happened, I don't know if the numbers will back me up on this. You have to look it up yourself. Probably on comiccron.com would be a good place to start. But I'd say those sales probably dropped overnight. And so, you know, if you want to save the comic book industry, one thing you got to do is get comic books sold back at gas stations and Walmarts and grocery stores again, you know. And the other thing you got to do is deal with the politics side of things, but that's a whole nother issue. And there's plenty of YouTube channels that talk about that, you know, ad nauseum, and I mean that respectfully. But the key thing here is, I think it's interesting, is that once we limited readers and kids' access to comics, their ability to find them, is there a direct correlation between the decline in book sales? Because kids eventually become teenagers and teenagers eventually become adults. And so with that in mind, if kids start out reading comics, would one assume that they would continue their voracity for reading, and that would evolve into magazines and books? I know it did in my case, and I would assume it did in a lot of all of you's cases as well, right? So if you want book sales to go up, you know, whether it be digital or, you know, actual tangible pages in your hand, the best way to do that is encourage kids to read comics and make sure that they have access to comics in the first place. I mean, we can debate what comic books they should or shouldn't read and for what reasons or what have you, but let's give some kids some comic books, for crying out loud. And let's save the book industry, so that way when someone asks somebody in the street 10 to 20 years from now, what's the book, to name a book, they can at least name a book. And if we can ask them what's the book that they last read, you know, at least they can name off an actual, you know, something that might be a novel or something of that nature, right? So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you took it in the spirit that it's intended, you know, to have a debate and a discussion on this topic. You know, I think it's very interesting. Please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I do read each and every single comment, or at least I try to anyway, and I do enjoy your feedback. And a lot of times, a lot of what you guys and gals have to say is a lot more insightful than anything I could ever conjure from my mind. So I really do appreciate it. So let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to be kept up to date to all my latest shenanigans, please remember to hit that subscribe button. As always, this is CB Smallwood, and I will see you in the next video.